morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for the final session of the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit. My name is Ian McKay. I serve as Canada's Special Envoy to the Indo-Pacific. And we're here this morning to talk about Canada and ASEAN. Of course, delighted to have the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, as well as the Honourable Mary Ng, Minister of Export Promotion, International Trade and Business Development, to join us for the discussion. So, Prime Minister, I'll start with you. 2 years ago in Phnom Penh, last year in Jakarta, this week here in Lao PDR, Canada and ASEAN have something going. What's happening with this relationship?
Well, first of all, it's been a busy few years. We've been deeply engaged with ASEAN for 3 years in a row, which is something no Canadian Prime Minister had done before. But if you go back many, many years, there's a deep connection between Canada and this part of the world. Whether we talk about companies like Manulife, that has been in Indonesia for over 100 years, or the National Bank of Canada, Banque Nationale, that actually is present in Cambodia as ABA, which is Cambodia's biggest bank. Or even in Sun Life in the Philippines. I mean, there's a deep story of Canada being engaged here for decades and decades. But right now, ASEAN is having a real moment, a real exciting moment where it's the fastest growing region in the world, and the sense of economic opportunity, of growth, of opportunity for citizens, for small businesses is huge, and Canada very much want to be a part of that. We have, over the past years, invested in an Indo-Pacific strategy that has 5 pillars, whether it's security and defense, trade, people-to-people ties, climate resilience, or diplomatic and leaders' presence, just showing up in the region. We've really seen over the past few years an increase of our presence in the region. And for me, ASEAN is a huge, huge part of that. Seeing the response from the different ASEAN leaders, whether it's Malaysia making partnerships with BlackBerry that are redefining what the digital economy can look like in Malaysia, with more countries looking at it, the deep ties between Canada on technology, but also on agriculture, on energy. There's a lot of conversations around nuclear that I think we'll get into. There is a really important moment where Canada has chosen to invest big in this part of the world because there's such a great complementarity and such great opportunities.
You mentioned the Indo-Pacific strategy. We're coming up to the 2nd anniversary of Canada's launching of the Indo-Pacific strategy. And I think it's important to recognize that that strategy is a broad and comprehensive regional strategy, but it is entirely aligned with the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. And I'm just wondering, you've met with all of the ASEAN leaders over the past couple of days. I noted President Marcos on the news last night. He said the relationship between Canada and the Philippines, and more broadly speaking, between Canada and ASEAN, is at a level, the strength, the breadth, the depth of which he couldn't have imagined to aspire to. What does that say to you, and are you hearing the same from other leaders with whom you've met?
Well, I think there's a real energy. There's a real dynamism that ASEAN is certainly showing, and that Canada is showing up for in a very, very complementary way. I mean, we have the deep people-to-people ties. Like so much of Canada, so many Canadians trace their origins to this part of the country. There's a pride and connection there. But more than that, Canadian businesses right across our country see that the opportunities here in Asia, and particularly with ASEAN, are something they want to be part of. And on the flip side, as ASEAN grows and looks to engage and find partners in the world, there is similarly a receptiveness to Canada. First of all, the fact that we've been showing up, the fact that we are there and engaged, not just the Prime Minister coming to ASEAN summits, but the trade missions that Mary has been leading, the offices, the trade offices, the agricultural offices, the business investment offices that we've been opening throughout the region, but also the opportunity for ASEAN companies and businesses to break into the North American market, break into the global market through Canada makes a lot of sense. There are people-to-people ties and diasporas that gives them an into Canada. And then once you're in Canada, you're benefiting from trade alignments and trade deals with the world that are among the best anywhere. We are the only G7 country with a full free trade deal with every other G7 country. We are connected into the entire world in a strong, stable economy that has technological solutions, the best educated workforce in the OECD, the natural resources that are going to be so important, including critical minerals and clean energy that is going to drive so much of manufacturing innovation. There is a huge moment for Canada right now in the world that we want to build with ASEAN. I mean, companies around the world are seeing what is exciting about Canada right now. Last year, we were the third largest in the world in terms of bringing in foreign investment after the United States, which makes us the #1 for foreign investment in the G20 per capita. The companies around the world are looking at Canada as having an incredible moment, whether it's on high-tech files like quantum computing and AI and cybersecurity, whether it's providing the critical minerals, the clean energy, whether it's nuclear or hydrogen. There are all these things that are drawing in investors to Canada, and we want to make sure we're partnering with this region for our mutual benefits.
So I think that's super important to highlight some of the sectors, some of the strengths that Canada brings to the region. But there's also a bit of architecture, I would suggest, CPTPP, the soon we hope to be concluded FTA with ASEAN. How would you describe those long-term, legally binding market access architectures to benefit us?
Well, let me turn to our trade minister to talk about that, because she's the one that's closing the deal on the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement that should be signed in the coming months.
Well, thank you so much, Prime Minister. It's terrific to be here with the business audience at ASEAN. And we are very much on track to concluding the Canada-ASEAN FTA in 2025. And for all of you businesses in the room, I'm counting for you to tell your ministers across the ASEAN, your ministers, how important this deal is. But what is trade? And what is trade to businesses and investors? It's helping businesses get into the dynamic markets that are here in the ASEAN. And I've taken many trade missions here already, in Singapore, to Malaysia, to Vietnam, dynamic markets. And I often say that a trade minister can easily want to have a trade mission. Well, you need businesses and investors to come on those trade missions. And I can't tell you how exciting it is, because hundreds of businesses, not just the big ones that the Prime Minister talked about, like the brands that you know from Canada, like Manulife, Sun Life, Celestica, BlackBerry, and so forth, but small and medium-sized businesses, women-led businesses, in the hundreds to these dynamic markets. Within 2 years of Canada launching our Indo-Pacific strategy, we will be in every single ASEAN country with Canadian businesses and investors. So we've got a really exciting program that we've already started, and many more businesses and investors coming in next year, the remaining of this year, in Philippines and Indonesia, and then next year into a number of the ASEAN countries as well.
So, Minister, I think that's remarkably impressive that you will have brought a trade mission from across Canada, SMEs from coast to coast to coast, into every ASEAN economy. So that's the ground game, and people are coming, and they're meeting opportunities, and they're bringing investment and trade opportunities. But what's the support mechanism that's in place? Because they can come for a trade mission, they go home, there needs to be some sort of connective tissue in the region for local companies to feed back into that momentum.
It is absolutely critical. It's the core of the trade part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. You talked about the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. There is real alignment there. So now we have what I call in Canada, the Team Canada Trade Toolkit. So it is giving capital, helping capital for companies in EDC, so Export Development Canada. We are doing business contracts, government to government, and we have a facility in Canada through the Canadian Commercial Corporation, CCC, so that we can help businesses facilitate those deals. We have the Trade Commissioner Service, which for businesses here who've worked with them, it is the best business development team. But when you talk about capital, and in fact, Mr. Cotter, who came in the room with us, said capital is everything. Export Development Canada now has offices in Singapore, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in Philippines, in Indonesia, and in Thailand. When you have an architecture that provides capital and export insurance for Canadian businesses, but for those investors in the region, these first in capital by the Canadian companies, then cooperates with other funds like the Temesics and others in the region to then create further on capital that helps grow not only Canadian companies, but the partnerships that they are working with right here across the ASEAN. And you're seeing that excitement. So whether it's the Trade Commissioner Services or it's Export Development Canada, I say that we are investing in Canada's growth here in the ASEAN, but really to partner with those in the ASEAN.
Thanks, Minister. I just want to dig a little deeper on the companies that you're bringing to the region. I think the Prime Minister's referenced this week that Canadian trade with ASEAN has doubled in the past 9 years. You know, Canada's got a long, long history of trading with our European partners, with our United States and North America partners. What are these companies saying about their appetite, their enthusiasm? Because they're not just showing up for a one-off trip, they're building relationships. What's happening with Canadian companies to accelerate their interest in this region?
Well, maybe the best way to answer that is to share a bit of a story that a Canadian company shared with me when they came on a trade mission. They said to me that they're so interested in ASEAN because it is a frontier market. They see the growth that we know to be in the region, and they want to be here on the ground. They see the future growth for their companies. So you're absolutely right. A business will come here because there is a business case and they see the opportunity for growth. And they say that when they come with us on the trade mission, it's like coming in with a very big door and having the Team Canada approach, creating business to business and investor to business contacts that actually helps them get into the market and then eventually grow in the market. I'll give you a couple of stories. A great green cement company that is part of an infrastructure project in Singapore. They have operations in Malaysia, and they're growing in Thailand. But guess where else they operate? They operate in the United States. They also operate in Europe. So the opportunities the other way is for service cooperation in some of the other markets. So that's what the Prime Minister was talking about. When you have trade, the trade agreement architecture that Canada has, you're doing business with Canada, but you're actually doing business with the rest of the world through our trade agreement architecture. And maybe one final story, because this really is about inclusive trade in real. Women entrepreneur, clean technology, watershed measuring, not only here in the Mekong working with Vietnam, but actually also the Seine in France. So it's Canadian technology, a solution that really works here in this region, but also has application elsewhere. So you really are seeing Canadian companies, and it's a small company, innovation, clean tech, women-led, and finding a real place here in the Indo-Pacific.
And these missions will continue into the future, and we'll make it a regular feature. So we've got the enthusiasm from the Canadian companies. We've got a highly skilled workforce, innovative companies, great technologies. We've got a very receptive audience here in the ASEAN region. We've got the architecture in place. Prime Minister, again, you've been meeting with leaders in the region, you've been meeting with businesses. What do you think is the Canadian value proposition in this region, in this moment in time?
Well, I think the entire world is reflecting on the fact that the global economic nexus is shifting towards Asia. There's so much growth happening here. There's so much opportunity. There's so many people being lifted into the global middle class and beyond that there's something really, really exciting, not just for Asia, but for the world about what's happening here, what's been happening here for decades. But when you talk to a random investor in Europe or anywhere else around the world, and you say, okay, are you investing in Asia? They may instantly think about, oh, okay, that means investing in China, investing in Japan, maybe investing in Korea, maybe investing in India. You know, they're obvious big players that people think of. And ASEAN sometimes gets overlooked because it's a little more challenging, it's a little less obvious as a place to invest. Well, I can relate to that. Because anytime someone says, oh, we need to invest in North America, what they really mean is, we need to invest in the United States. And we have to fight a little bit harder to make sure that people are noticing us. And that's been a challenge of Canada for decades. Well, over the past few years, the same way that ASEAN has been taking a lot more space up in how investors around the world are thinking about where to go. What's happening here, the dynamism, the opportunity, the movement, everything that you're building here in ASEAN has parallels to what we're building in Canada in many ways. Like, we have gotten in Canada to be a place where people aren't thinking of as an afterthought in investment. It's now one of the top investment choices for companies around the world. Companies with big global offices that think about, okay, where do we make our next $100 million or $1 billion investment? are turning to Canada a lot quicker and a lot sooner than ever before. Why? Combination of environmental leadership and green energy, a strong social safety net that allows for things like childcare and healthcare, and strong, safe communities that lead to some of the best trained workers in the world, the best educated workers in the world. We have trade deals with the world, as I talked about. We have advanced universities and research. A Canadian just won the Nobel Prize for his work on AI just a few days ago. Canada has been leading in quantum mechanics and quantum computing. We've been leading on so many different high-tech areas. Just look at BlackBerry, look at everything we're doing in terms of cybersecurity and protection. But at the same time, we have the natural resources. We have the mines with the critical minerals that are going to be the essential ingredients to the economies and the green transitions of the future. We have the workforce that can not just take those minerals, but transform them and manufacture them into high-tech automobiles and technological solutions that the world needs in a way that meets our environmental standards, our labor standards, the things that the world is increasingly looking to and valuing and saying, no, we need to know that the products we're selling, because consumers are demanding it, have top quality built in, and fairness and opportunity and strong communities built in. That's the shift the world is starting to make. It started to make with ESG investors, but it's become much more than that. We're not yet at the place where consumers are universally demanding, no, all my products need to be green, all my products need to be done with responsible labor practices, but we are getting closer to that. And that offering that Canada has, that story that we're telling about a reliable, stable country that can be a partner, that isn't there for its own benefit, but is looking for win-wins because we're family connected all around the world, and can be that trusted partner to work alongside. Not one wins, one loses. It's not a zero-sum game. And Canada understands that better than just about anyone else. So what we've been building in Canada over these past years has been working. We are now the third largest economy in the world with a AAA credit rating. Canada is a safe and solid place to invest. We're projected to have the highest growth among the G7 next year, faster even than the United States. We bounced back faster from the pandemic. And when you look at the opportunities for the coming years, Canada is incredibly well positioned because we have that reliability and predictability in the supply chains. We know the geopolitics around the world is shifting so much. And there's so much uncertainty. We saw through the pandemic what happens when supply chains are disrupted. So for people looking to diversify their platforms, their supply chains, their production, Canada is one of those best bets anywhere in the world. And that's the result of choices that Canadians have made over the past decade to participate and offer solutions to the global economy that are good for us, but also good for the world. And that's why I'm so excited about how we fit so well with ASEAN and all that together we're going to be able to do in the coming years.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It sounds like the future is indeed very, very bright for Canada and ASEAN. This ASEAN Leaders Summit, the two themes of connectivity and resilience, I think have been very well represented in today's discussion. So on behalf of the Prime Minister and Minister Ring, we want to thank Lao PDR for their terrific hospitality, hosting of an extraordinarily successful ASEAN Leaders Summit, as well as an ASEAN Business and Investment Summit. We know we'll be back. The future is bright for Canada and ASEAN. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you all.
Thank you.